Good morning, Springfield, and happy Friday. We are back with another episode of A Word with the City Manager. I'm your host, Logan Cobbs.
And I am your city manager, Brian Heck.
And we are very excited about the topic today. But before we dive into that, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about our new setup?
Yes. So we have some improvements to our podcast studio here at City Hall. I want to thank actually Dwayne Sims. He's an employee of the city, but he's watched some of our past episodes, and he was just stating it was kind of distracting with the mask to a degree because I know I was always having to pull mine up, and it just muffled the sound to a degree. And so Dwayne had suggested looking at implementing some type of protocol or measure that would protect us, so that we would not have to wear masks, but still be protected from each other. So we're 6 feet apart. And we also have a new sheet of plexiglass in between us. So this way we don't have to wear the mask, but we're still able to practice safe procedures around COVID-19. And so, Dwayne, I just want to thank you for making that suggestion. And then we also have improved our ability to view your comments and your questions in the room. And so we're just excited again to offer an opportunity to speak to the community and share information with the community about what's going on in our great city of Springfield.
Absolutely. Thank you for that introduction. So today we will be talking about the levy. Back in 2017, we did pass a levy, and we wanted to give you just an update on where we are. We're about halfway through the levy, so we just wanted to give some background information and give you all an update. So, Brian, do you want to do a rough overview of the levy that passed in 17?
Yeah, so we had asked voters, our citizens, to approve additional revenue in the terms of 0.4%. So our income tax before the levy passed was at 2%, and that increased with the passage of the levy to 2.4%. And a lot of the purpose behind the need for that additional revenue was driven by cuts that cities across Ohio experienced from the state of Ohio. So there's something called the local government fund,
Okay.
and the state started cutting that back from municipalities when they were experiencing their budget shortfalls. And so it was a way for the state to adjust and recapture revenue back to their general fund by cutting back to the cities. And just to give an idea, we used to receive approximately $5.4 million from the state of Ohio. That was back in about the 2007, 2008 time period. And then the state started making those cuts. And so now we receive anywhere between 1.6 and 1.9 million from the state. So 5.4 million down to 1.6, 1.9. So not quite a $4 million drop, but pretty close. And so again, Springfield was not the only community impacted. It was communities across Ohio. And at the time, Governor Kasich had said, if you want services, pay for them locally. And so, I believe that the services that touch you on a daily basis, 24/7, are provided at the local level. That's our police, that's our fire, water, sewer, streets. Those are the types of services that you depend on a daily basis, and those are provided by the local government, the local level. And so communities across Ohio have had to raise additional revenue, whether that was through property tax or income tax. Again, cities specifically are not able to collect sales tax. That's all done at the county level. And so our only means of revenue is property tax and income tax for our general fund. And we actually are a community that does not collect a lot of property tax. We only collect a very small portion of the property tax that you pay. And that actually specifically goes to a police levy fund that was approved back in the early 90s. And so we are very dependent on our income tax. About 80% of our general fund revenues come from the income tax. And so when the state started cutting us back, the local government funds, we really needed an additional revenue source if we were going to continue to make the investments in our infrastructure as well as our public safety for the community.
Brian, I think it's important to note, you kind of touched on the fact that in '07 and '08, we had a lot of that those state cuts, right? But we're in October of 2020, and those funds still have not been restored, which makes this levy so much more important when we talk about funding our community.
Yes, exactly, Logan. And again, we have not seen those revenues return to the 2007 levels, or really even anywhere close to 2007
Sure.
levels. Again, we at one point were receiving about 5.4 million annually from the state, and that has dropped now between 1.6 and 1.9. It fluctuates. It'll be interesting to see what COVID-19 does as far as projections of the local government fund. But we are still needing to provide services to our community. It's not as if those services and the need for those services have dropped off just because the revenue decreased from the local government fund. There is still a need for those services in our community. And, you know, a large portion of our budget annually goes to public safety. And so that's
Sure.
a big piece. But then we also, again, need to invest in our infrastructure.
So that was a good segue when we talked about that levy and what those promises were that we made to the community if the levy passed. So we talked about some additions to fire, PD, streets, and safe streets as well. So I want to kind of take those one at a time.
Mhm.
So let's start with streets. So talk to me a little bit about what the city had promised versus what we've done to date.
Yes, so we knew as a community that our streets were in rough shape, specifically our neighborhood streets. And those are the streets that we do not have the ability to go out and get state or federal dollars to help repave, reconstruct. And so those streets have to be paid for locally. And so that was a challenge for us. We used to have a neighborhood street program. That program dropped off around 2008. Because of our revenue issues. And so we were not really able to invest for about 10 years into a neighborhood street program. And so our streets continued to deteriorate. And so one of the commitments from the levy was a minimum of $2 million from that new levy money would go towards neighborhood street repaving, reconstructing. And so that was the first time since 2008 that we were able to commit specific dollars to that neighborhood street program. I will admit we're way behind. We are way behind in our ability to. $2 million is not going to pave every street in one year, but we have a plan in place, and we have been knocking streets out, those neighborhood streets, really since 2017, when the levy passed and went into effect July of 2017. We were able to do a small program the latter half of 2017, and then really ramp that program up in 2018. And I'm glad to say we have spent more than $2 million. If you look at the overall money that we have been able to put towards our neighborhood streets, we're over $3 million because we're doing it the right way as well. And I think that's what's important to know is we want to protect the investment that the citizens are putting into our neighborhood streets. And so what I mean by that is we are looking at the utility infrastructure that exists underneath that roadway as well. And if there's water, sewer, we're working directly with the gas company, the electric company, if necessary, and looking at that infrastructure that's underneath our streets, because if that infrastructure is bad and we go in and just pave over top of it, it really does no good, because we're going to be right in there tearing a new street up to fix that old infrastructure. And so we're going in and we are preparing these neighborhoods so that they can have a long-term investment in their roadways and not just a quick, short fix. We want to be able to protect the investment and make it a long-lasting investment in our neighborhoods. And so to date, we have actually paved over 27 streets. As I said, we've spent well over the $2 million annually to make sure that we were paving neighborhood streets and getting them fixed. And we have a plan. We held meetings early on in the process with the community to talk about streets, talk about the process for selecting streets. And so we have a plan, and there's over 38 streets that are scheduled going forward in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So we
Awesome.
have a plan, and we continue to build that plan so that we can look ahead again and make sure we're protecting the long-term investment that we're putting into these roadways.
Ryan, I'm sure a lot of people are watching, and you just touched on the fact that we have planned out for years to come what streets we're planning to repave. So what if somebody in the community has a question regarding what is my street being paved? Where should they go?
Yeah, so they can certainly reach out to our office, the city manager's office, and they can also talk with our service center. And so
Okay.
sometimes the service center can make repairs here locally. If it's potholes and such, please report those. We have a report a concern feature on our website, or reach out at 525-5800 to our service center to report a street that they have a concern or an issue with. And our street department, led by the superintendent, Eric Erder, they'll go out there and they'll take a look at it. Don't take for, a lot of times we take for granted that we see all the problems. We
Right.
see the potholes. We see the challenges that exist. And that's not true. We can't be everywhere every day. And so if you have an issue, a concern, please report that to us, because there may be a possibility that we have not been made aware of that yet. And so we want to know the issues that exist out there. Now, one of the things that I will say that we've been proactive on is pavement condition rating. So that's a factor that we looked at early on in this. We had pavement condition ratings set for each roadway in our community, and we're working on updating that data right now. We partnered with the county and the Transportation Coordinating Committee to update that information, our PCR ratings, so that we have a good idea going into the next wave of where our streets ranked in terms of their condition.
Wonderful. So I see some questions coming in. Let's start with Mike's question. Good morning, Mike. And Brian, he asked, why has it taken so long to do Belmont? It's been messed up for 2 years.
So North Belmont, and specifically the section, Mike, that I think you're referring to, is from Mitchell Boulevard all the way up to Home Road. And that has been a long project. Part of the reasoning for the delay in that project were originally the bids that we received were well over the engineer's estimate, so we had to rebid the project. We have something in our charter that if a bid comes in over 10% of the engineer's estimate, we cannot accept those bids. We have to go back out for bids. So that created some delay in the project, but that is a large project. It's not just going in there and resurfacing a roadway. North Belmont had a lot of issues in that section. So it is a complete reconstruction. And when I say a complete reconstruction, I'm not just talking about the roadway. All of the utilities needed reconstructed as well. And so we've been focused. We had to do the utility project first, get the utilities done, and then now they are working to finish up the roadway. And I believe that road is about complete. And Mike, I agree, it's taken a long time, but it's going to be worth the wait. Again, one of the reasons why we went in 2017 and paved Miracle Mile was because we knew this section of Belmont was going to be under construction and a lot of traffic would be diverted to Miracle Mile. And so we were trying to think ahead, knowing that Belmont would be under construction for quite some time. And so I'm excited to say that project is about wrapped up, and we know that we have protected that investment in that roadway by doing it the right way the first time.
Yep, that was a good question, Mike. We get that one a lot. So Brian, we also had a question come in earlier this week about the traffic signal at Harding Road. So I know you did answer that one on Facebook, but I was hoping that you could just tell us a little more about Harding Road.
Yes. So the traffic signal at Harding and Limestone was damaged by wind that came in, and the pole collapsed and was not usable anymore. And so we quickly began to work to replace that. The problem we're running into, and I don't want to relate it all to COVID-19 because we were seeing delays in timing for steel even beyond or before COVID-19. But the order timeline for those steel poles is about 6 months. And actually, it's been even longer on this project. So I believe right around March is when that pole went down, and that signal had to be removed because it was not safe. And we ordered almost immediately the new infrastructure, the new steel poles. And right now it's looking as if those are going to come in and we're going to be able to get that installed right around the first of the year. So right around January of 2021, we'll be able to get that signal back up and running. But we honestly, we've been waiting on the steel poles to come in. And again, that's a challenge we face as some of this aging infrastructure and older infrastructure needs replaced. A lot of it's out of our hands in terms of we want to be able to move on the project quickly, but we're at the mercy of when can we get the equipment, when can we get the supplies in, and there's been a lot of supply chain issues the last couple of years as it relates to steel.
Absolutely. It's good to know that that is still on the city's radar, though, to get that signal back up and running. So Arthur asks, do we have any old gravel pits that are owned by the city that can be developed for public or private use?
Thanks for the question, Arthur. I believe this is probably Arthur Solomon. So thank you for joining in and listening to our podcast. That is something I know you asked that question earlier, and I'm looking into what's available. We do have a lot of ponds that are up near our water treatment plant. And a lot of those ponds are actually necessary as part of our water treatment process. And so the possibility of utilizing those, I am unsure of at this time, but I am looking into that question to see if there's possibility of that to be used for recreational use. But again, some of the ponds that you see there up around Eagle City and off of 68, Route 68, are actually part of our water treatment process. And so obviously we have to be very protective of our water source. And great question. And I continue to look into that to see what possibilities exist, Arthur. So thank you for the question.
Awesome. Brian, let's hop back into the levy topic. So tell me more about, we've just talked about streets. Let's hop into fire. Tell me more about the commitments that we made on the fire end versus what we've successfully completed.
Yes. So I believe that public safety, both fire and EMS, as well as police, are some of the most important services that we can provide our citizens. And those services are provided at the local level. And so working on our fire, we have been dealing with an aging fleet for quite some time. Our equipment, both our medic units as well as our fire apparatus, are pretty old, or were old until the levy passed. And I will explain what we're working on right now to fix that problem. But one of the things that had to happen in 2016, early 2017, is we actually had to close down a station. So we closed down Fire Station 5, which is out on Commerce Road. And when we closed that down, obviously that's not something we wanted to do, but we had to because the revenues were not there to support that station. And so when we closed that, one of the commitments with the renewal, or with the passage of the new money levy, was to reopen that station. And so we did that in July of 2017. We were able to put that station back into service. And so it's still in service today out on Commerce Road. And if you know Commerce primarily serves one of the heavier business districts of our community with Bechtel Avenue and so forth. And so we were glad to be able to open that station, bringing back both its fire and its EMS unit that operated out of there. Now, as far as investment in our infrastructure and our equipment for our fire EMS, one of the things that we knew we needed to do is replace our medic units. And I'm happy to say that we were able, with the passage of the levy, to purchase 5 new ambulances and put those into our rotation, into our fleet. That is great. Hopefully, no one listening or people don't have to utilize those ambulances in our community. But if you have had to rely on our medics to come and transport you to the hospital, you probably felt that ride. And, that's during a time when you're at most vulnerable and at most need. And so having a medic unit that's newly equipped and able to transport you safely and effectively to the hospital is important. And so purchasing those 5 new medic units was very important in improving and investing in that fleet. On the fire apparatus side, all fire EMS equipment is expensive. It's not inexpensive, and so medic units range from 200,000, 250,000 once they're all outfitted. Fire apparatus exceed that. So we're on a little bit slower plan of replacing that equipment, but we have started that plan, and the first one will actually be put into service very soon. That is a new rescue engine. So it replaces Rescue 1, which is out of Fire Station 1. And this is one of the units that responds. Most likely, if there's a fire in the community, you're going to see Rescue 1 there. And so it was important that we replace that because it was aging and needed to be replaced. And so that actually will come online anytime now. But just to give an example again, so I talked about the steel poles. It's taken about 18 months to get Rescue 1 into service. And so it takes time. It's not something that's quick. And so we have a plan in place that we continue to look at our apparatus, both our ladder trucks, our rescue engines, and trying to develop that replacement plan for the future for our community, because it's really is an investment in our community. We have a great fire EMS division. It helps with our insurance throughout the community by having such a highly certified, highly trained fire rescue team in our community. So there's a lot of benefits to it, and we need to continue to invest in that benefit to our community.
Absolutely. Thank you for that overview. So we've talked streets, we've talked fire. Let's move on to PD. Talk to me about the commitments that we made on the police side versus what we've achieved to date.
Yeah. So one of the biggest commitments that we made on the police side stood around hiring additional officers.
Okay.
And so we have a charter requirement of 124 officers. And we promised, as part of the passage of that new money levy, to hire 6 additional officers. And the importance of having those 6 additional officers allowed us to implement what's called a Safe Streets Task Force. And again, because of budget constraints and staffing constraints, we were not able to implement that Safe Streets Task Force for several years. And the reason why that Safe Streets Task Force is so important is they go out and they are specifically dealing with the violent crime and the drug issues that we see in our community, in our neighborhoods. And so they're right there. They're able to effectively and devote specifically their time and resources to fighting the violent crime and the drug issues that we see in our community. And so we reinstated that Safe Streets Task Force in 2018. And we have seen more than 490 arrests from that.
Wow.
We've seized firearms. We're able to seize drugs such as methamphetamines, heroin, crack, cocaine. We were able to pull that off the streets. And what's important about that too is the Safe Streets Task Force wasn't targeting users. They were targeting the dealers, the suppliers, because that's what's important. We need to get that stuff off of our streets. We do not have room for that drug activity on our streets, in our neighborhoods. And that Safe Streets Task Force was able to go after the dealers, the suppliers,
Sure.
To get it away so that it doesn't impact the users. And so they've been very successful in this short period of time in their re-implementation. And we're going to continue that program, and we've continued to build our police force. Right now, I believe we stand at about 125 officers. We just hired again. We've had active hiring campaigns every year over the last 3 to 4 years. And there's been a fluctuation of our numbers, and but we're confident we'll be able to get above that 124 specifically, but get to that 130 number so that we can keep that Safe Streets Task Force in place, helping our neighborhoods directly. And then the other big piece to it, Logan, was just like fire, and we closed down Fire Station 5, we had to actually close down the Johnny Lytle Community Police Substation, and that hurt. If you've been to the police substation, our community response team Many of you may remember Paula Rich, who is now retired, Tom Sellner, who is now retired. We have a great young team out there now for our community response team, and they've been able to work with the Tom Sellners, and Tom worked closely with Paula Rich, and so we have Zach Massey and we have Thomas Potter that are part of our CRT team, our community response team, and they operated out of that Johnny Lytle police substation. They depended on that substation because it was right in the neighborhood.
Right.
And so we were glad that we were able to open that back up. That opened back in July of 2017 as well. And again, we have 2 officers that are dedicated to our community response team, and you will see them. Obviously, COVID-19 has affected neighborhood meetings and other events, but they are active and they're out there in the community educating individuals and building relationships, because that's what's important. And that's what we're seeing in today's age. It's important that the police division and the community build a relationship, a strong, lasting relationship in our community. And our CRT team and Zach Massey and Thomas Potter are right at the forefront of that.
I think they do a great job of attending public meetings and going to different forums and really trying to bridge that gap between the community and our police department. So kudos to them. But Brian, we have talked about streets, we've talked about safe streets, we've talked about PD, and we've talked about fire. And I think it's important that all of those wonderful things that you named were able to happen due to the levy that passed in 17. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't give a sincere thank you to the community for passing that levy years ago.
Yes, I can't agree with you more, Logan. Just thanks to the community for stepping up to the plate. They understand the need for those services in our community, the importance of those services in our community. And I am glad that we have been able to keep to our commitments, because that's important. It's kind of the motto of promises made, promises kept. And we've certainly wanted to be able to keep those promises. And I'm just ecstatic that we've been able to hold true to those and actually have been able to do more than probably what we even imagined. Specifically, again, on the street side, we've been able to do a lot more as far as the paving goes in our neighborhoods. And I'm glad that we're able to continue that program and have a plan in place so that we can hit all of our neighborhood streets at some point in time. Again, it's not going to happen overnight,
right.
But we're going to keep going at it. We're going to keep fixing things in our community. We're going to keep investing in our infrastructure, investing our public safety, because that's what's important to you as the community.
Wonderful. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in as it stands, so we will go ahead and wrap up. Brian, thank you for your continued commitment with these podcasts. I think it's really important to get this really relevant information out, so thank you again.
You're welcome. I'm just excited to be able to share information with the community. I think it's important. Our best citizen is our most educated citizen.
Absolutely.
And this is just another opportunity that presents for us to be able to share that information with you as the public. So, and thank you, Logan. I appreciate your leadership on these podcasts. If you haven't caught yet, on Thursdays, the opposite Thursday, so next Thursday will be another look at the city of Springfield with Logan Cobbs, and she's been hosting these podcasts throughout the organization and bringing different speakers, different topics each week. And we're just excited that this is an opportunity for our community to learn more about what's going on in Springfield. So thank you for that, Logan.
Of course. Well, we are going to hop off of here, folks. We will be back here in 2 Fridays from now to talk about a different topic. So thank you for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks.